Hello and welcome to this Rain Taxi virtual event featuring Uwem Akpan in conversation with Okey Ndibe. I'm Eric Lorber, the director of Rain Taxi. We're a nonprofit organization that champions aesthetically adventurous literature. And if you don't yet know much about us, I invite you to check out our website anytime after this event to learn more about our quarterly magazine of critical writing, our chapbook publishing, and the many events we host throughout the year, among other advocacy programs. Whether you're an occasional visitor or you'd like to become a member, we'd love to have you along for the ride. To do everything we do, Rain Taxi earns funding from places such as the National Endowment for the Arts and the Minnesota State Arts Board. The latter is made possible by the voters of Minnesota thanks to a legislative appropriation from the Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund. Their support helps keep most of Rain Taxi's events, like this one, free to attend. But we also really need support from individual readers like you. So if you're able to pitch in a little something, please use the donate button at the bottom of your screen. And please know that even a small gift makes a big difference. There are other ways you can participate on screen tonight as well. You can, of course, use the chat to send your comments and observations. If you have a question, put that in the Ask a Question box, and I'll be collecting those and bringing them back at the end of the event tonight. And then, of course, you can buy the book using that button. And remember that when you purchase a book at a literary event, there it is, you are supporting not only the author and their publisher, but also the event host and a great independent bookstore based in an actual community. Tonight, that's our friends here at Majors and Quinn Booksellers in Minneapolis. With New York, my village, in my hands, it's my great pleasure to welcome Uwem Akpan. About a decade ago, maybe a little more, many of us were stunned by a debut book called Say You're One of Them, an instant classic and well acknowledged, well rewarded. It won the Hurston Wright Legacy Award, the Penn Open Book Award, was chosen for Oprah's Book Club, among many other honors. And now we have another debut, a debut novel from Uwem. And tonight I'm so thrilled that we're going to get to hear about it through the lens of our old friend Okey Ndibe, wonderful novelist, author of Foreign Gods, Inc., and other books. So I welcome both of these gentlemen to our screen. I can't wait to delve into the world of New York, my village. Welcome, Uwem and Okey.
Thank you very much, Eric. I'm going to dig in quickly and immediately. Uwem, it is such a delight for me to be celebrating this truly powerful, truly magnificent achievement. When I read Say You're One of Them, your debut short story collection, I knew instantly that you were a writer that the world needed to pause and take note of. And I thought that that novel, that book was so powerful in its projection of a subject that you were not going to be able to come anywhere close in your next work. But I'm so delighted to say that you have both surprised and stunned me by producing this truly magnificent work. At some point toward the end of this, I'm going to speak about one particular reason, a very personal reason why I'm a big fan of this book, in addition to, of course, its great artistic and political resonance. Uwem, I would like to begin by inviting you to give our audience a little taste of any section of the book that you want to start with.
Okay, thank you very much. And I thank Rain Taxi. We go way back, and we can spend this whole time thanking each other. But let's come to the case.
Yes.
I want to read the opening two paragraphs of the acknowledgments in the back of the book. There is no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside you. It's Maya Angelou who said this. I was born a year after the Biafran War, 1967 to 1970. For 2.5 years, most of the ground offensive in the Atlantic Theater was in minority lands. Its crazy stories shaped my 1970s Ikoro childhood. In the last 50 years, they have followed me all over the world. I can't forget the day a pro-Biafra Igbo harassed me in a Nigerian restaurant in Marbleton, Georgia in 2016. He was screaming in my face that our minorities didn't support Biafra. It took the intervention of other Igbos for me to finish my goat pepper soup. And these past 10 years have also been really difficult because, beset with self-doubt and despair, I was bent on fictionalizing this war from the perspective of the minorities of the Niger Delta. And I didn't always know whether I was weighed down by the prospects of writing a second book after Say You're One of Them, or by the very bruising war or wars I was trying to portray. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Uwem, for that excerpt taken from the acknowledgments of your remarkable book. And it's actually a remarkable acknowledgement. And I'm happy that you read that section because even though it's the acknowledgments, it speaks to some of the powerful themes that you explore in this book. So at the heart of your novel is your protagonist, Ekong Udolsoro, who is running an editor at a Nigerian publishing company, who has won a Toni Morrison Fellowship to a publishing firm, a kind of mid-level publishing company in New York City called Andrew and Thompson. And so the novel begins with this very, is both powerful and funny and sad drama before Ekong obtains a visa from the US Embassy. It takes him 3 tries. And what the first question that was asked of him, and which accounted for the rejection of his visa, is a doubt by the consular officer who is interviewing him for a visa that there is such a people called the Anang people. So we find a moment, therefore, in your novel where there is the erasure of the subject. Okay. So my first question is, how does it feel to come from a place, to belong to a group whose existence is indeed constantly called into question?
Thank you. Okay. When you're a minority, when you're a minority, you don't really exist. You wait for a chance to breathe. And so in this country, the United States of America, when people ask me, are you Yoruba? I say no. Are you Igbo? I say no. Are you Hausa? I say no. They change the topic. They simply change the topic. I could as well be from Madagascar or Congo. It doesn't matter.
Yes.
So, and you realize if we are talking about 500 ethnic groups in Nigeria, it means the erasure of 497 groups. Now, if you don't even exist, if you are being killed, who will mourn?
Hmm.
Okay. And this is what happened to the minorities of the Niger Delta.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when Biafra came in, we were seriously tortured, raped, killed, you know, treated very shabbily. Nigeria pretended it was coming to save us from the Igbos. They came in, they tortured us,
Hmm.
they raped us, they killed a lot of our people, and took some of the women away back home, you know, war booties.
Hmm.
And all of this because of oil.
Hmm.
So we don't even know each other. If you look at the Nigerian constitution, you have the languages that are being recognized are Yoruba, Hausa, and Igbo. And English, I don't know whether Arabic is recognized. I don't know. It hurts sometimes because it's the Niger Delta, these minority lands, that these are the lands actually feeding the country.
Hmm.
But we don't exist. You don't know whom to run to. So I've been waiting to write a book that begins to say, this is, you know, the Anangs exist,
Mm-hmm.
these minorities exist.
Mm-hmm.
And so at that embassy, I set up that scene where he says, you know, I am an Anang man. And the embassy official says, who? You know, you are making this up to get a visa.
Mm-hmm.
And to prove that his group actually exists, he had to get documentation from the big universities of America.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Show to the embassy people
Yes.
that this tiny group exists.
Yes.
Okay, so that's the moment you were bringing up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that again, that was a powerful moment where um, the publishing company has to obtain attestations from anthropologists from Yale and from Columbia to tell the U.S. Embassy in Nigeria, yes, the Anangs are indeed a people; they exist. Um, and let me sort of speak about the immediate appeal and poignancy of your novel. I'm somebody who is fairly widely read in Nigerian literature and Nigerian, especially the history of Nigeria, the history of the Civil War. And I was sad to say that it took your novel to really instruct me about an important gap in my knowledge of this history. I was a child of the war. I was 6 when the war started, or 6 or 7 when the war started. And yet, somehow, I've read so many books, but it took reading your book to find the dilemma of the minority ethnic groups within that sector of Biafra and the ways in which they were besieged from both sides. Could you speak to, and I think that your acknowledgement already spoke to it, but could you speak a little more expansively about a sense of historical corrective duty that you felt to, as it were, reinscribe the story of a group or groups of people who had been erased from historical accounts of the Biafran War?
You know, as I've said to you before, I came to this country first time 1993, and these were the questions I was facing. Are you this? I said no. Are you that? I said no. And then I realized I did not exist in these people's way of thinking.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I'm in Nigeria and people think I am Igbo because anything Eastern Nigeria, people tend to think, this is Biafra. Biafra means all these people. And so I had been thinking, how do I write our story so that even Nigerians will recognize that this country is very diverse. And so I read something in 2013 by Professor, is it Mankoff? I've put him in my acknowledgement. He was talking about the Biafran War. He wrote this in 1967, that American journalists were trying to make sure that America did not know that Biafra was diverse. Because if they knew that Biafra was diverse and there were minorities, and the story got out of how Biafra treated minorities, that the American public would, not want to help Biafra, because they will say, you deserve what you're getting from this Nigerian, you're also an oppressor. So they had shut down that information. And then this guy wrote in to say, look, there are Anangs, there are Ibibios, there are people from Ogoja, Bekwara, Ogonis, Efik, and like 30 groups like this, the Jaws, Urobos, Isokus, Ikweres. So all these people had been asking for a region for themselves. The same way Midwestern Nigeria came out of Western Nigeria. Okay, they wanted an independent, region, and they had not succeeded. So these animosities were there, and then the war came. The Igbos were fighting two wars. They were fighting the Nigerian military. They were also fighting to keep the minorities silent within Biafra. Okay. So this story has been there. Unfortunately, what has been told to our Igbo brethren has been that, minorities betrayed Biafra. But a lot of these people saying this, they were in Igbo land as children. They did not know what their soldiers were doing to people. In Ekparakwa, in Ikwenang, in Ikorekbene, they didn't know. It's like when American soldiers are sent to Iraq, nobody here thinks that they are raping the Iraqis. Nobody knew they were, raping the Vietnamese people or the Korean people until they started seeing half caste. Okay, nobody knew this. So this story has been here. Yes, okay, you are very well read, and we have talked about these issues. You're actually one of those who used to say to me, when all these folks screaming Biafra, I don't know whether they've spoken to the minorities because they want to take our land and put into Biafra again. And you used to say, well, I don't know whether these people are thinking well, whether they've spoken to people. And I used to say, they can get away with this kind of thinking because in 50 years, we've not been able to get our story out. Okay. So, and I was writing this book, hoping, praying. And, as I've said to you, and the acknowledgement bears this out, a lot of Igbos helped me track information in Igbo land. They protected me. They saw what I was trying to do. They were shocked as you were, and they're like, wait a minute. A war usually has many victims and angles. I cannot thank those Igbos, enough. Some of them did not want to be mentioned in the book for obvious reasons, security, reasons. So I've been working on this, and I was like, one day I might succeed. One day I hope I succeed. And coupled with, I wanted to write also an immigrant story. So the immigrant that comes from Nigeria has this in his background. This is where he comes from. Gets to America, he runs into racism.
Yes. So let's sort of segue into that. Because so Ekon comes in to work with this New York-based publishing company, and he's on a fellowship, and he's told. And by the way, so I'd like to start with his experience first of Times Square. Because in a lot of ways I see the drama of erasure and invisibility playing out there. So he goes to Times Square. It's 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 um, it's a deluge of people there. It's a variety of people, but in a lot of ways, the drama of his invisibility is also staged in that scene, because so there's this King Kong lady in Times Square on this huge 30-foot screen, who would bend and pick different people, different objects around her, and Ekong uh, does his best to be picked up, does his best to be noticed, but it's as if he remains invisible. So if you can speak about that moment where he's arrived and he's in a crowd of people, but it's a very impersonal experience, and an experience also where his invisibility is again being staged.
Yeah, I lived near Times Square. And Times Square is what it is. It's perhaps the most known square in the world, the most celebrated. You can think of New York. If you are visiting New York for the first time, that's one of the places you would like to see.
Yes.
So it's this iconic place, a lot of skyscrapers and big TV screens. Is constantly exploding, and it's just, I was amazed the first time I stepped into Times Square. And then I actually started thinking about that, King Kong lady who picks your image, and people see you, and then she drops and picks another person. I wanted to get to use that to finally talk about Nigerian or African food.
Yes.
So, and at the end of that, what finally settles it for Ekong is the day he brings his food to Times Square.
Yes.
Monedia yam porridge, brings it to Times Square. He's eating there, and before he knows it, the lady has picked his image and is up there in the screen. The food is seen by everyone.
Yes.
That's like an epiphany. Out here, people don't eat African food. What's African food? That's how they put it.
Yes.
So I wanted to dramatize that you can actually buy condiments for African food in your stores here, and show how it's cooked. That we use fire.
Yes.
We cook it like ordinary. We put it in our mouths, not in our. And a lot of my American friends have been like, "Wow, where can we get this food?" Sometimes the way they react to our food is almost as if we eat stones.
Yes.
Or worse, poison.
Yes, there's that comment that Chad makes about about Nigerian egusi and so on, and we'll get there for a moment. But before we do, again, before I get to the publishing company and what sort of shocking provincialism Ekong encounters within that environment, I'd like us to talk about his neighbors. There is I think Brad.
Yes.
And is it Jeff?
There's Jeff, and
Jeff, and then there's Brad, and then there's Brad's girlfriend, Alexandria.
Yeah, Alexandria.
And so the first time he sees his neighbors on in this Hell's Kitchen where he rents an apartment, he goes as is typical of us Africans, to greet them, and they utterly ignore him. So this becomes a chastening moment, a wake up call for him that of a different cultural, again, a different cultural practice, but also sort of another moment where he becomes invisible to his neighbors. Could you speak to that?
Uh-huh. Yeah, I mean, that finally leads to a confrontation.
Yes.
Okay. Because in New York, the funny thing about New York is you have so many people together, and most times you are moving in a crowd, so you are locked into each other, but you don't actually see each other.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody knows anybody
Yes.
unless you have a protest,
Mm-hmm.
and they're marching together.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the big picture.
Mm-hmm.
But somehow these New Yorkers have friends, they have families, they have a group of people they relate, to.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted that first clash to be about Ekong coming to New York and thinking, oh, my next door neighbors, let me say hello to them.
Yes.
And he tried to greet them. They didn't respond to him.
Mm-hmm.
So it shocked him
Yes.
because they were standing there. He greeted them twice.
Yes.
Okay. And Ekong tries that 2 times. It doesn't work. Then they insulted, or he thought they insulted his guests,
Yes.
black people.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, Keith, who is an African American, who is already a friend of Ekong, the only friend Ekong has in the building,
Yes.
is telling him, "You're lucky they have not called the police."
The police on you, yeah.
Yeah, and that is not an uncommon experience for white people to call the police on any black person they see around.
Yes.
So I was eager to bring that experience, to bear in the book.
Yes. Okay. So let's get Ekong into the office finally of this publishing company. So he comes and he gets what he regards as a rather warm reception. Apart from sort of uncomfortable comments about his accent, he feels really warmly welcome. And he's told that he'll be invited to join the twice monthly editorial meetings where the publishing company decides which books they are going to go for to publish. The first thing he recognizes when he gets into the publishing company is that he's the lone black person there. And I think that there is a wonderful, wonderful way that you describe it. If I can find it quickly, you said that. Give me a second. So he feels, as it were, besieged in this white space. This is the first time he's inhabited an exclusively white space, and he feels as if his blackness has become darker. So that's the first sort of rude awakening for him, before, of course, we can get to what happens subsequently with the people. But so speak about that, because people have this idea of the publishing sector as one of the most socially aware sectors that you can find, and so they expect a measure of diversity and an inclusive environment. But that's not what Ekong sees the first time he steps into this publishing company.
Yeah, thank you for this question. I myself used to think exactly like, um, I used to think, yes, these folks must be very diverse. These folks must be very humane,
Mm-hmm.
and not they cannot be discriminatory. Um, and then my first book was so widely accepted that there was this long auction for the book, and 12 publishers, or is it 14 publishers, They came to the auction. They wanted the book.
Mm-hmm.
So this allowed me to visit many publishing houses, big publishing houses in New York City. And each time I went in, I was shocked how white that space was. They were nice to me. Of course, I had something to sell them, maybe.
Yes.
In time, many of these folks have become my friends. So I could ask them very concrete questions. Why is it so white? Why is it 90% white? How come Amazon has diversified? How come Google has diversified? How come CNN has diversified? How come even Fox News is trying its best? And we publishing, we midwife all these emotional books, fiction, non-fiction about inclusiveness. How come we are like this? So some of my white friends said, look, that's why we need someone like you to come and write the way you write about Africa. Bring those your images and rugged way of writing. And I was very touched when they said this, because I thought to myself, there are actually bigger African writers or black writers than me. So why me? These people want to kill me?
Well, you were foolish enough to start asking questions. So
Yeah,
when you start asking questions, you take on the burden.
Yeah, I should have just, kept quiet. And so I started trying to write, but I was very scared because I knew immediately deep within me that this was like writing a play about dictatorship and taking it to Sani Abacha, Nigerian dictator, or to Muhammadu Buhari.
So a savage play
Yeah.
about a dictatorship.
Yeah.
And then you give it to a dictator, an African dictator, and say, hey.
Practice on stage. You'll be lucky to come out with your head and neck still intact. So this is what I did, or tried to do, to go after publishing and give it to publishing to publish and perhaps pay me
for the trouble.
So I was very scared.
Yeah.
And of course, I was rejected many, many, many times. It was my friends in the system who said to me, "Well, you cannot give up." In fact, of Yado Corporation.
Yes.
The arts colony in Saratoga Spring in New York City, in New York State. They heard what had happened to me, and they found a way and invited me to Yado, and they brought other writers who had experienced this same rejection.
Wow.
So I could meet and talk with them. I cannot thank Yado enough for doing that. They liked my writing. They supported my first book a lot. So to see me struggle like this, they were like, "Well, we will do something."
Yes.
So that gave me a lot of energy.
Yes.
And they helped me with research into publishing.
So let's get to the first day then that Ekong, your protagonist, shows up to discuss books. Okay. And Ekong thinks that there is this book on the Tuskegee experience. I think it's called The Trails of Tuskegee or something.
Yes.
And he feels that this is of the selection of books that have been discussed, that this is the most emotionally rich and historically meaningful, significant text But then there is a huge pushback. And I think that at some point during the conversation, I believe it's Angela, one of the characters, one of the employees of this publishing company, who says, readers, the readers who really buy books are tired already of these accusatory books, that accusatory texts and so on. So you juxtapose this experience of a publishing company that is hostile to a book that is based in a historical, horrific historical experience for African Americans in this country, and pushes back against it. And the experience in Nigeria, which you also talk about in your novel, where the country, the government of Nigeria, has officially banned the study of history in schools. Could you talk about this impulse to shut off against historical accounts?
Yeah, okay. We've talked about this before in our numerous conversations.
Yes.
We are tired of being seen as the violent ones. Africans are violent. Africans are this, Africans are that. They're anything but human beings. So there was a desire within me to write a Swiftian book, Jonathan Swift, Gulliver's Travel. So I could compare the history of violence in the two countries, the US and Nigeria.
Yes.
So that theme is there in the book. And it's in that context you can talk about the Biafran War. But I didn't want Americans to begin to say, look at these Africans, they're always fighting wars. They're always killing each other. Then they want us to come and stop them, help them from killing each other. What's wrong with you guys? So I had to track for my reader or readers this Tuskegee experience, where the government of this country intentionally went to Tuskegee to infect them with syphilis. And that stuff ate the genitals of the men, the African-American men in this country, in that city. It went on for 40 years. 40 years. Okay? In these 40 years, there were big-time presidents. John F. Kennedy, Eisenhower. Who is going to convince me they did not know what was going on? Why don't you stop it?
Yes.
Okay? So that's a serious history of violence. Then you go to the sharecroppers. How 300 African Americans were hung on trees. Each tree will have like 10 people. They were lynched and they hanged on those trees. And you cannot after that say we Africans are the violent people. You should be saying we are like the Africans are like us. We have a common humanity. So even in the book, you see that 50 million Native Americans from Canada to Argentina were killed so that this land.
I'm sorry to interrupt you because I see that we're terribly running out of time.
Yes.
But there's this quality about your book that in a lot of ways, in some ways, I think that it's an album, an anthology of the ways in which the small people have been crushed and are crushed in our world. And you speak about this really across historical experience from the Middle East to the China to the French in Africa and the British in Africa and so on. So your book is really so broad in that sense. But I would want us to end without speaking about, you and I are Catholics. And the Catholic Church has done wonderful things, and you do point to some of the heroic things that the church has done, its priests and officials have done in Nigeria. But it's also implicated in some of the horrors, both of the Biafran War, but also the horrors of racism in America. Could you speak quickly about it? And I'd like us to get to Ujai, my favorite character in your novel, before we round up. Yes.
Yes. All of us who are Catholics, we bleed for our sins, the sins of our institutions.
Mm-hmm.
There's none of us who, you cry. You want to cry when you see the numbers of people that priests, for example, have abused and how those children have been hurt.
Yes.
You also see the schools, the hospitals that the church has built over time. During this pandemic, the Catholic Church in Nigeria handed over 400 hospitals to the government as, for COVID treatment. Okay. And, the number of schools and everything, but the thing is, a book like this is also challenging our dear church to do better, to use these painful but also very funny stories, because that's one thing in the book. The book is very funny.
Yes, it is. Yes.
To use these stories to get to the human spirit and say, we can invite everyone to the Eucharist. Yeah, we can do this. We can be better than this. We can be more inclusive. So that's what I was trying to do. The book actually is inviting everyone in the world to do better than they did yesterday.
Yes.
So nobody is spared.
So in view of that, let me get to Ujai. Ujai is a 6-year-old girl.
By the way, it means beauty.
Oh, beauty. And Ekong. So it's a very interesting contrast then, because Ekong means war.
Yeah.
And Ujai, beauty, and the guy named War sort of build a special relationship. 8 years old, but Ujai packs the intellect and the moral conscience of an adult. Could you speak to the power of, the kind of hope that Ujai represents, a way of how she represents a way to break out of this terrible history that we are trapped in?
Yeah.
And in a minute.
Yes. Ujai represents children who have been born in the diaspora. They grew up hearing us talk about Nigeria. So a lot of them, they are very excited about Nigeria, home. They think that is home for us. They think there will be no discrimination there. It will only be Black people. And so it's not only Africans. There have been Arabs in this country who suddenly their children goes to join Al-Qaeda. They run to the Middle East and they think they have something there to fight for because they don't feel they belong here. So Ujai represents, that, yes, his relationship with Ekong is very tender, very strong. So even when the parents try to disappear Ekong, Ujai finds a way to unearth him. And what is very striking, even for me, is the fact that Ujai and her classmates sit down and write that group letter to America.
That's right.
Actually to Ekong. And they say everybody's voice must count in this letter.
Yes. Which in a lot of ways then is sort of the summative beauty of your book itself, that the voices must resound, including the often erased voices of the minority. I'm afraid that this conversation, at least the portion of it where I'm conversing with you, has come to an end. But I promise to speak about quickly, particularly intimate reason that I love this otherwise amazing book. And that's that I was reading the book and turned the page, and suddenly here I am, Okey Ndibe, with my book, Never Look an American in the Eye, as characters in your book. So I felt so flattered. This has never happened to me in fiction. So thank you very much, Uwem, for doing this. I'd like to now call on our host, Eric, to perhaps come in with questions from the audience.
Yes, absolutely. And thank you both. What a wonderful conversation. A wonderful way to celebrate the publication of this long-awaited novel. I want to remind our audience you can still purchase a copy of New York, My Village just by hitting the buy the book button on the screen. Isn't it beautiful? And in fact, I want to just start by saying long-awaited, because it has been a while since your previous book, Uwem. And tell us about the genesis. Did this emerge over time, or was there a writer's block, or what is your process been like in the decade or so since publishing Say You're One of Them?
I had so many things to write about. I did not know how to bring this together.
Yes.
So this book, at a point, I wanted to set it in Las Vegas.
Wow.
Can you imagine?
Yes.
And it didn't work. Then I tried to set a portion of it in China. So I went to Beijing.
Wow.
It didn't work.
Wow.
And then I came to New York City, and I had bed bugs.
Which we didn't talk about.
Which is the big theme in the book.
Yes,
It's another war.
yes.
The
Big
war
characters, yes.
in New York. So the bugs were successful in hitting two spots on my left side, my rib cage, the rib side. From that point on, I knew immediately I was going to escalate this to all the bites and the fears.
Yes.
But it didn't come easily. It took me a long time to be able to make the different themes and things work in unison. I thank my editor, Elaine Mason of Norton, a lot, because this book had been rejected. And then I found where I sent it to her 4 p.m. one evening. The following day, by 10 in the morning, less than 24 hours, she had accepted it. Wow. She read only 70 pages. And she said, "When publishing needs to see this book. This is actually a book about publishing."
Yes.
And, and so she did everything in her power to make sure it came out. And then there was an Igbo American assistant editor, Nelma Amadiobi, who read this book and screamed at Norton and said, "This is me. I am this assistant editor. This is how I think of my food. This is how the embassy in Nigeria, the American embassy in Nigeria was." So between Nelma and Ellen, we spoke and came up with edits. And then they suggested maps. You've seen the two maps at the beginning of the book. And so I cannot thank them enough. I cannot thank Erin Lovett, my publicist, Michelle Waters, my marketer. They are an excellent group of people, and they allow me to ask all my stupid questions.
Yeah.
And I want to thank my agent, Maria Messi. Yes, go ahead.
Oh, wonderful. No, that's a wonderful tribute to the community of publishing. How many, just how many different hands and inspirations are involved, and advocates are involved in bringing a book to the public. And I was like Okay I was very excited to hear you read from the acknowledgments. I have to say, the acknowledgments of this book are unlike any I've ever seen. It's
Absolutely, yes.
an essay, really.
That's right.
It's an immersion into kind of what the experience is.
Yeah.
And it gave me a lot of insight into your writing style. But I also wanted to ask about that community. What's your sense of, even though you are satirical at points, of the publishing as an industry and as a community, what's your sense of that broader community of people who care about literature? And also, you are a teacher, so I imagine that is part of your sensibility as well.
Yeah, after with George Floyd, after the killing of George Floyd, a lot of groups started talking about racism, systemic racism. And so a lot of the rank and file people in publishing were almost revolting. It happened in the big publishing houses that calling for diversity now. So they tried to promote a few Black people. They couldn't find, them to promote, so they're looking for how to bring minorities. And so my prayer is we must continue to put the searchlight on them, because if you don't do that, then the human spirit can revert to what it's comfortable with.
Yeah.
Like the larger society, you have a lot of pushback. All these supremacists who are very frightened by diversity. These tendencies are also in publishing. But I believe with a book like this, it will allow publishing to see itself, and the fight to make publishing inclusive. This book will help the commoner, the masses, understand what is happening in that very, reclusive and hidden part of America. My students ask me every time, well, how do I get an agent? What happens when the agent takes the book? Whom does she give the book to in publishing? The gate man, the security man, the gardener? And when the publisher finally gets the book, how is that decision made? And minorities always worry. There's no minority doesn't worry with, will I be accepted? Would this be too much for white people? The same concerns Angela has in the book.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. It's usually like that. Even if it's George Floyd, when people have protested for like 2 months, some people say, no, stop. We've heard you. Everything will be okay. And then the following week, you'll see the same thing. So this awareness has to be there. So in that sense, I'm hopeful that it's better than yesterday.
Yes.
But also it's almost as if the other side is mobilizing. Okay, so we have to make sure we have allies in the system, because without the white people who are my friends in the system, this book, I would not have known how to research, for this book. They're the ones who said to me, well, this is what you are saying is true. Though you are being rejected, it's okay.
Yeah.
It's true. What you are saying is very true. And sometimes the editors who are, mere editors, like the book, but their bosses, the people who control money, will say, throw this shit away. What is this? And that kind of thing. That's why they're trying to look for someone to promote in the minority groups to also handle that, the purse strings, the wallet of the. So I am hopeful, but also I am very, I get frightened many times, because always wherever we look, there's racism. We look at there's racism. So anyway, let me stop blabbing.
No, I thank you for those words, and I want to echo that fiction has such an important role to play in educating people as to the reality and to moving them forward. And I think your book, in dealing with things like the publishing industry and the war that you deal with, and so many other things, it's different to experience it in fiction than through the essays and nonfiction and other kinds of information that is equally necessary, but the emotional register is so different here. So thank you for that. And thanks to you both, luminaries of Nigerian writing, American writing, wonderful fiction writers, and thank you for this wonderful conversation. And thanks to our audience. And as we close, I want to mention to them that Rain Taxi has more great author events coming up before the year ends. So we hope people will come back and enjoy other conversations and readings. Thank you again, Uwem. Congratulations and good night. Yeah.
Congratulations, Uwem.
Thank you. Okay, I'll call you. Okay, don't go away.
You know where to find me.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you very much.